Good morning. My name's Donnie Glover, and welcome to the BlackUSA.News morning show. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Hope you get outside today and get some of this great weather. Waiting on a couple of people who may possibly be joining us today. Anyway, how are you? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you practicing self-care? Are you checking on your neighbors? Are you checking on the seniors? Are you keeping things in perspective? Are you not going crazy by the pandemic and all of the associated behavior? Because it seems like some people have lost their minds. Got a lot to talk about today. Can't wait to get to the topics. Are you traveling? Have you been on a plane since the pandemic? Or are you staying in the house, staying away from people? Are you going away for the holidays? My neighbor wanted to go away for Labor Day, went driving, got down to Richmond and turned around. The traffic was unbelievable. We're going to get to some news, but I think it's also important to talk about some of the small stuff, like how we're doing. Self-care. I hear a lot of people talking about self-care these days. Are you practicing self-care? And it means keeping stress to a minimum and keeping stressful people at bay. I think the old people say dealing with people with a long-handled spoon. I've been seeing a lot of that on social media about how people had to cut people off to keep their peace of mind. Sometimes it has to do with relationships. Sometimes it's just, significant other relationships. Or sometimes just people your friends, where some people got to go. They ain't got to go home, but they got to get up out of here. So are you protecting your space, your peace of mind? And then are you making sure you're not being too isolated, that you do stay in touch with people? I learned some time ago this term called HALT. Never get too hungry, too angry, too lonely, too tired. That's something to remember. And I tell you this, if you're sad, don't go drinking too much, because you're putting a depressant on top of a depression. And that's double depression. On the other hand, if you get to go out and hang out with your friends and catch up, that can be a very therapeutic thing. I joined my cousin and his wife down at a seafood house on the water a couple of weeks ago. And I had just a marvelous time looking at the water, enjoying family, enjoying some good food. We got to do that. We got to come up out of our shell and learn to enjoy ourselves. Got to learn to forgive. Boy, forgiveness. Now, that's a whole book right there. I read today how forgiveness does more for the forgiver than anyone else. Forgiving somebody. What's the point of carrying around that bitterness, that anger? Just let it go. Just let it go. Forgive. Forgive yourself. That can be tougher than forgiving somebody else. We're already mad at this person. At least we know what we're mad at, and we can forgive it. But forgiving ourselves, well, now that can take some doing. Yeah, so it's important. That was a message from my neighbor. Trying to look out for my neighbor. Good morning, Rico Crawley. Peace and blessings from God's given hands. Well, I know we do have a book signing this week. Saturday the 16th. That's the anniversary of the Million Man March. Wow. That's been some time. Was it 2016 or so? 20, 25, 26 years. Boy, how time flies. 25 years? 25 years, yeah. But we're still here. The minister said back on that day in D.C. to take that mission back home, go back home and make a difference in our communities. So we're coming to you live from the city of Baltimore. We get to talk to people from all over the nation, all over the world. Matter of fact, our first live broadcast from overseas was with Mr. Michael Haynie. He was in Uganda, and Kenya. And so Mike does a show now on Sundays at 6 p.m., 60 Minutes in Black USA. Be sure to check out our evening program. We have programs every weekday evening, 7 p.m. On Mondays, we have Shared Spaces. That's with Chap and Quita Chansey. Tuesday night, I get to do the Donnie Glover show. Wednesday night, Sister Biz. If you missed this show last week, it was on white privilege. That was really, really good. Thursday nights, we have Art Blacksher, Brother Doug, and he comes to us live from Oakland, California. Friday nights, Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard. Saturday, 10:15 a.m., The Blackout live from New York with Tasmere Gathers. And then on Sunday, again at 6 p.m., we have Mike Haynie and 60 Minutes in Black USA. By the way, if you like a show, get in where you fit in. You have until December 31st. After that, the game is going to change. We're going to take it to the next level. But if you still want to get in, you got till December the 31st. If you have a show idea, we'd love to hear it. We want to talk to everybody right here on BlackUSA.News, the voice of our people. I saw something in the news and it's been ongoing, about our women celebrities, and how they dress in public, having all of their goodies out. And there are essentially two schools of thought. Is one that essentially says, to hell with what grandma thinks, I can do what I want, it's my body. And that is true. And then, as alluded, there's grandma's side. Would you want to see your grandmother in public looking like that? I can do what I want. Or some self-control. I am reminded, as Malcolm X stated, celebrities, entertainers are not our leaders. But we live in a society today that if you got 1 million followers, then somehow you're a civil rights leader. You're the creme de la creme of activism. And you can be what you want in this day and time. You can be whoever you want. But let's not forget, there's somebody watching. And I'm not talking about the media. I'm not talking about other adults. I'm talking about your children and your grandchildren. They are watching. It's kind of hard to tell a child to do this, to do that, when the parent, and God forbid the grandparent, is off the chain. Do you really need somebody to tell you what to wear and what not to wear in public? And you call yourself grown. But we live in a world, you say something, somebody pulling out a gun. What have we become? Our ancestors went through all of what they went through. 300, 400 years for us to come out and act like the plumb fool. I hear people saying something else. They say college is not for everybody. What are you saying? You stupid? You dumb? You can't handle college? You can ride a dirt bike up the middle of the street with one hand through traffic, but sitting down at a desk and reading is somehow all of a sudden Not everybody's good at it. Where did we get this subpar? Where did we get these excuses from? Help me out. I mean, our ancestors died trying to learn how to read. And now you're telling me it's okay not to know how to read. Now, maybe it ain't college. Maybe going to technical school. Maybe going in the military. But do something with your life. You've been in school for 17 years. Well, through the age of 17, 18. So it typically starts with 6 years. So you're talking about 12, 13 years of training for you to become an adult. I saw one person write, stop putting children out at 18. We cause more damage than we do help. My mother would laugh at that one. She said, 18, you're leaving here. College, military, work, but you're leaving here. Then we want to watch so many grandparents raising grandchildren. Yeah, everybody needs some help. But it all starts at home. Education starts at home. Manners start at home. Yeah, manners start at home. It's called home training. Lights come on. You better have your butt in the house. Saturday, before you go outside, you better clean your room, the bathroom, and the den. Then I had the dining room. And if it snowed, who's the first front that you shovel? Your own. Can't go making money down the block and you ain't taking care of home. You want your mama to come out the door, slip and bust her head? It all starts at home. What happened to those rules? What happened to respect? I remember it had to be 25 years ago. I started paying attention. People were calling their mother by the first name. Huh? It all starts at home. They took prayer out to schools. Remember that bumper sticker? They took prayer out to schools and now the prisons are filled. Cats going to prison. I saw a news story where some people in prison, several inmates, got bachelor degrees. I thought that was beautiful. There was a time when you could get a bachelor's degree here in the city of Baltimore. I mean, state of Maryland. Then they stopped it. Most people are not going to stay in prison forever. They're going to come back out. Don't you want them to work? I want them to work. Only makes sense. And considering that so many inmates in this country look like me, that means they're going to be living in my neighborhood when they come back home. Yeah, I want people to work. I want anybody who wants to work to work. Speaking of which, there are jobs galore out here. I mean, everybody's hiring. Excuse me, you could literally walk into a spot and get a job anywhere. A young man, I heard this beautiful story a few days ago. A young man, and I can't remember where he said he wanted to work, but it's something like a music studio, a radio station, and he said he was going in volunteering. That's how I got my first job in journalism. But nowadays, very few people want to give up some free hours. When I was a media student, there were no paid internships. It was just uncommon in the world of media, which meant you could sit on the sideline or you could get involved. And eventually you're going to get some money. Of course you're going to get some money. Nobody's going to work you forever and not pay you. But are you willing to volunteer to get in the door? I was. And I'd do it again. Sure would. And if I want something big, I'll volunteer there too. Who's going to turn down a volunteer, especially if you're clean, you're presenting yourself as a professional, and you have some skills too? I love to write. Since I was first learned how to write, love to write. I shared that too with media students, how your ink pen can open doors. A lot of people want to get into media, television. They want to be in front of the camera. All of that's well and dandy, but as we learned back at Coppin under Ron Nichols back in 93, 94, 95, 96, that the person that does the writing, they will forever have a job. People in front of the camera, they come and go. Weather girls, they come and go. Anchors come and go. But the one that does the writing of the scripts, well, they can just literally write their ticket. So you give me a moment, I need to check on my guests. See if they're still going to join us. Bear with me a second. I know one is coming in a couple of minutes because we need an update, a political update. Thank you. There was a big crab feast yesterday down in across the Bay Bridge in, where was it? All the way across the Bay Bridge, in a part of the world that many of us here in Baltimore City never get to see. It's actually a very beautiful part of the world. Anyway, big old crab feast called a Tawes crab feast that happens every year. And by the way, tonight is the first gubernatorial forum that we know of. And it will be down at the BWI Weston Hotel from 6 to 9. Most of the Democratic candidates, major candidates, will be there. And this will be the first time they get to lay out their Black agenda. So many of us are looking forward to it, looking forward to the interaction, the presentations, to see how these candidates carry it, to see how they handle the campaign flow, who they bring with them, how prepared they are. But tonight is very special. Again, 6 to 9 p.m. at the BWI Weston Hotel. That's down in Linthicum, to find out what the Black agenda is. And I haven't seen it, that Peter Franchot has already laid out a Black agenda on his website. It will be interesting for me to see what the Black candidates lay out, because we still live in a world where Black politicians are afraid to say Black. Amazing. 2021. Can't say Black. Scared to say Black. Whispering Black. Black! Damn it. Name of my first book is Unapologetically Black, to reiterate that very point, to help reverse the psychological damage and trauma that has happened to us over the generations. We've undergone some inhumane trauma. Time to now address it and heal from it and get stronger. But you have to acknowledge whatever demon it is. A guy said to me over the past couple of days, he was talking about, if you want to know who a Black man really is, see him in front of a white man. Some Black people acquiesce. Sometimes white people acquiesce. Almost like we want the other person to accept us, so we're willing to, lay down this value, that value, and all of that's fine and dandy, but never forget who you are. And if you're Black and in America, don't go too far trying to be accepted by other people. The young man wrote it on Facebook today about how some of us are almost ashamed of our Blackness. Don't be ashamed. Hey, man, you said 10 minutes ago. Show be halfway over, man, so we might have to reschedule you. Talking to one of the comments over here. 10 minutes. You said 10 minutes ago. Seems like it's a bad day for him. But in terms of being unapologetically Black, we've all been traumatized. We've all been in situations. I'll never forget, a white man called me boy. And it took everything in me not to split his wig. I was a waiter. Caught me off guard. And so a lesson that I learned, deal with racism on the spot. I should have checked him. He was the owner. I should have checked him. Caught me off guard. A mayor was there, a governor was there, caught me off guard. Have you ever had one of them situations? Like, I know he just didn't call me boy. Yeah, he sure did. And I should have G-checked him right there on the spot. Do you call your mother boy? I don't even know what the correct response is. What you say, girl? I mean, how do you come back to something like that? You busy trying to wait the table. I'll never forget it. 25 years ago, I never forgot it. And I never forgot how it made me feel. Like sucker punched. Less than. Am I working for a savage? Speaking of savages, oh my goodness. There's a couple of stories. I shared them earlier today. One is about these two brothers, two cousins, ex-felon cousins, stormed the Capitol. Yesterday, they got sentenced to 45 days in jail. A black man get more time than that for being bad on Facebook. Because Facebook always want to be blocking black people for the smallest stuff. So black people get blocked on Facebook for saying, hey, I'm proud to be black. But these ex-felons who are traitors, they storm the Capitol, they get 45 days. That's what America do. 45 days for storming the Capitol and participating in some behavior that caused the death and murder of other people. Trump should be on trial and he should be locked up. But America won't deal with it. But baby, there's a thing in this universe called karma. You think you're going to duck it? We think we're going to duck karma. We do. We all do. Until it comes back like a boomerang, plucks us in the back of the head. And then we know the reality.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Fair to million.
My name is Donnie Glover. I'm the author of Unapologetically Black and I Am Black Wall Street. And I was just alluding, Attorney Dashiell, to these two young men, ex-felon cousins. They got 45 days in jail for storming the Capitol. But you're not surprised.
No. I'm not surprised, but also I don't know what these two individuals did personally, but I mean, there's a whole host of charges that could have been placed against these guys or these people, and clearly they could have been given sentences significantly more harsh than 45 days had the judge elected to do so, or had the prosecution insisted upon it, I suspect. But again, I'm not surprised.
Edward Hemingway and Edward Bauer, two cousins with extensive criminal records, were sentenced Wednesday to 45 days in jail for storming on J6. Edward Hemingway, not Hemingway, but Hemingway, Virginia. Robert Bauer of Kentucky asked for probation, but District Judge Tanya Chutkan said incarceration in this case was the only way to deter future violence. What you're being punished for is the decision to take the protest and turn it into a violent occupation of the Capitol at a time when we were attempting the peaceful transfer of power, something that has never been interrupted in our country's history. 45 days, and that's the judges. I've seen them get a black man more for jaywalking.
Well, I recently had a trial for a friend of mine that I handled, and the situation was this: it was a young black woman who had an encounter with a white gentleman, and as a result of that, the white guy called the black woman all kinds of names, bees, and the so-called N-word and all that over and over again. And they got literally in her face. And this was happened outside of a club of some sort. And when she told him to back off, and threatened to hit him if he didn't, he said, you know, go ahead and hit me. And he's almost standing nose to nose. And so she hit him. And then he charged her with assault. And the case came for trial, and the judge found, as a matter of law, that a white guy can call a black woman any name he wants, and it doesn't justify hitting him. And was poised to give this young lady a 5-year prison term on a second-degree assault charge. It didn't happen that way. She didn't get that term because I think the judge ultimately agreed with the argument that I made, but nevertheless, he did find the young lady guilty and suspended what would have been a 5-year term because he didn't feel that the conduct of the white guy was sufficiently provocative to justify the woman hitting him.
Let me guess. The judge was a white male.
Pardon me?
The judge was a white male.
Yeah, absolutely. And all events occurred in Baltimore County. So, you know, Doni, as I've said, the issue is who does this country belong to? Who does this country belong to? And that's what the so-called Civil War was about. And that is the same issue that has been fought over today on many fronts in many different ways. Unfortunately, there's too many people who don't recognize it, and those who do won't say it. But that's what's really at issue here. Who does this country belong to? And they've come to recognize that decision ultimately will play out at the ballot box, which is why we saw across the country in mostly Republican states, or states were controlled either by Republican governors or legislatures, we've seen this attack against open access voting. I call it open access voting. We've seen, you know, closing down polling places and so forth, under the guise of supposedly eliminating fraud that nobody's proved to exist in the first place, because they recognize ultimately the power of the ballot. And the only way you change anything is change the people who are making the decisions.
So the next time a white guy gets all up in my face or my woman's face, what advice would you have for me?
Number one, I would say, you know, make sure it doesn't happen in Baltimore County. And number two, yeah, and number two, understand that name calling, more likely than not, however provocative, however insensitive, however demeaning, would likely not result in a finding that you were justified in physical confrontation.
Now, what about if I'm hit first?
That's self-defense. Then the question would be, did your response mirror the attack? And if he hit you with a board, did you shoot back, or did you hit him with a board? You hit him with a board, you're okay. You shoot, I don't know, not so much.
Have you had to face this situation?
I'm sorry?
Have you had to face this situation?
No. The answer is no. I've never been in a situation where a white person has stood toe to toe with me, or nose to nose, or whatever you want to call it, hurling epithets and names and resulted in a confrontation. That's never happened. I've never experienced that.
I have.
And many of us have, but I tell you what I have experienced. And as I tell people, if you get stopped on the highway, and the police officer, state trooper, whatever is white, the chances are there's gonna be a conversation of some sort, and you'll get a ticket or you'll not get a ticket, and you go on. However, if the white officer is accompanied by a black officer, the one that's going to render the harshest treatment is always going to be the black officer, because he's got to demonstrate to his white partner that he's with him and not with you.
I'm a witness.
Yeah, and I have experienced that.
So I'm pulling up this case. I wanted to know, did you see what happened in it was a black paraplegic who was dragged out of his car.
Oh, yeah.
And this was in Dayton, Ohio. Now, the police officers accused him of coming from a drug neighborhood. He, in fact, was coming from his rental property. He had property in that area. And they said the man said, "I don't think I can get out. I'm a paraplegic." And the officer said, "I don't care what you are."
Well, yeah, Donnie, part of the problem is the whole aura that surrounds the law enforcement, and it starts from the proposition, I think the wrongly asserted proposition, that a law enforcement officer's life is more valuable than anyone else's. Is more valuable than that for the people that they're supposed to serve. Now, that feeling, that culture evolved from the principle that well, if a criminal knows, if a criminal is willing to attack the people who are supposed to protect the other people, then that person is incorrigible. That you got to protect first the people whose job it is to protect the public. So that principle then has elevated the life of an officer over anybody else's. I suggested that there ought to be an oath that every black or white has nothing to do with it. Every officer ought to take, and the oath if I were running it would say, before I would take the life of an innocent person, I would give my own. Or let me state it conversely. I would give my own life before I will take the life of an innocent person. Now, if you're not prepared to give that oath and mean it, then you should get a different kind of job. You should be in a different industry, because we don't weaponize you as a person. We don't give you guns and vests and helmets and horses and tanks to protect yourself. They're supposed to protect the people. And if you're so afraid of the risk of your job for your own safety, then you got to take a job where there's less risk. You don't get to shoot first and ask questions later. That's not how it's supposed to work. But that's precisely how what's been ingrained in this culture in terms of the relationship between people, particularly people in the black community and the police force. At least that's my
opinion. I got one more story for you, where there was those two cousins who got 45 days. Another story has come out, and I'm glad to finally see these, because I've been told about these time and time again. This one J6 insurrectionist, he goes and represents crimes. This was yesterday. Against the advice of the judge, this Capitol rioter chose to represent himself at his bond hearing, and then he fesses up to 2 more felonies. And so I just want to commend these J6 people for getting caught and being exposed. And I hope some other ramifications. Mr. Haynie, are you familiar with any of these J6 scenarios? 45 days in prison for insurrection behavior?
No, I'm not, Donnie. I was listening to you earlier, but no, I'm not.
Okay, well, let me ask you both something that you both do know about. Where were you yesterday? You're muted, Mr. Haynie.
Yeah, Donnie, first of all, good morning, Mr. Dashiell. How you doing?
Fine, sir. How are you?
Good. I was down in Crisfield, Maryland, Donnie, and I attended the Tawes crab and clam bake feast, which is traditionally a backdrop for Maryland politics. First time I ever attended, Donnie, and what stunned me initially was the backdrop that it was held within, and the black housing projects less than a half a block away. I walked through them, talked to a couple of people on the way, and I said, here we are on the bastion of politics and wealth in Maryland for this event. And we're walking by housing projects in a community that is not done well, has not fared well anyway. I said, I wonder how people really feel about that. Didn't get a chance to ask specifically to the politicians about that, but that was stunning to me where it was held and the backdrop to it.
Did you see projects, Mr. Fields?
No, I did. I was there also, and I'm surprised. I'm surprised I didn't see you because we sort of stood out, I think. But it could have been a matter of timing. And also, yesterday I was suffering from an attack of sciatica, so I went back to my vehicle at some point,
right,
and just went back to work. And so it probably was a time when you were walking around. But yeah, I was there. I was there also.
Yeah. So I parked near 6th Street. I parked near 6th Street, which is near a Subway shop, and so when I walked towards the main gate, I walked past the projects, and so I talked to a couple of the people on the way back, and they said that this has been a housing project, mainly for blacks for years. 1 or 2 whites lived there, but mainly for blacks, less than a half a block away. And many of them actually work there, and I've got some pictures of those that work there and appreciate the business of being hired to work there.
Mr. Haynie, Mr. Haynie, cut to the chase. What happened down there?
Hey, it was a good time. The food was lousy, from my perspective, but the real entertainment and meal and feast for the college. Yeah, food wasn't good at all, man. Wasn't good at all. I didn't enjoy it.
You drove 3.5 hours.
And I heard a couple other people said picnic food. One person that I was stunned to see that was there, and let me just show you some pictures if I can, Donnie, if I can pull some pictures up. One person that I was stunned to see there, not this picture, was our former mayor. Our former mayor of Baltimore was there. Stephanie Rawlins Blake. Can you see that picture, Donnie?
No,
Stephanie? Yeah, so Stephanie Rawlins Blake was there, and she said she's glad she wasn't running for office, but she was there. You see her, looking good. Daughter in college down at Spelman now, very relaxed. On the left is Al Hathaway, who is now the campaign chair for Peter Francho, but Stephanie looking good, interacting with people. She was there as well. So
I didn't see her either, but I actually rode down with Hathaway, and but the most telling thing to me, Donnie, which reminded me of my home, because I'm from the Eastern Shore, I'm from Salisbury. I went over to the stand where they were serving, we were shucking clams.
Yeah,
I like clams and oysters raw. And the interesting thing was there were 4 people behind the booth, three black guys and 1 white guy. The 3 black guys were shucking, and the white guy was handing you the plate with the clams on it. And it reminded me so much when I was coming up and working in the fields as a kid. We all in the fields digging potatoes or whatever, and the white guy's driving the tractor. we riding on the back like a buckboard, taking the stuff back up to wherever we were separating it. So it just reminded me that no matter what, even when it comes down to shucking clams, we don't get to be up front for any purpose. It's always the white guy. And I sort of looked at the guy when he handed me the clams, and he said, why are you looking at me like that? I said, I'm just reminiscing.
Did they look like this, Mr. Dashiell?
I'm sorry?
Do you see that picture?
Yes.
Yeah, these were the shuckers and the folks that were working the event. Many of them, some of them came down from Philadelphia because I had a chance to talk to them. Came down from Philly because they couldn't get the people in the projects next door to work as they normally work for whatever reasons. I suspect the reason, but they couldn't get them to work. But, I found them interesting, and the conversation with them interesting, their perspective on the politics interesting, because the bottom line is that
Mike, you can't sugarcoat that. If the people in the projects ain't working at a clam bake, that's like black people not working the Prius They're trying to tell you something.
Well, Donnie, let's look at the year as a whole, and let's really look at why they may not be working. Maybe they got their $2,400 and they decided that that wasn't important for them because, people are protesting working right now. They don't understand the fact that that $1,200 or $2,400 equates to about $200 a month, but they decide enough is enough, particularly with being, to what Mr. Dashiell was alluding to, subservient at this point for as long as they don't have to be. So, so the residual around the politics yesterday was pretty compelling to me. Talking to the support staff, looking at the environment, and then delving into the politics at some point and talking to Peter Franchot, talking to Tim Adams, having a good conversation with Wes Moore, looking at Heather Mazur down there trying to unseat Andy Harris, who in your jurisdiction, Mr. Dashiell, your hometown, Andy Harris is huge down there. Even amongst black people don't necessarily dislike him, in terms of what he does based on what their necessities are in a waterfront community that depends on the water to bring in their economy, in spite of his harsh language. And I think you're aware of how Andy from Cockeysville, next to Baltimore, has such a large demographics or geographical district all the way down there to Crisfield on the Eastern Shore, which is 3.5 hours away, because of how it was gerrymandered.
Right.
So that they said, well, we'll concede to the Republicans, Crisfield and down there in Salisbury, your area, to a guy like Andy Harris so that we can have more of a democratic presence and representation up here. But how does a Cockeysville guy represent Crisfield all the way down there? And so you really have to look at the politics of the situation and the Democratic Republican game playing that goes on. And that's a big Democratic play when they gerrymandered a district to give the Republicans something to stay out of the greater Baltimore and other areas where they knew that they had a strong population of voters, particularly black people, to ensure that the representation came and stayed the way that they wanted it to.
Yeah, and all of that is true. And frankly, the biggest threat, not a threat, but the principles that most undermine the concept of democracy as most people think they understand it, is the so-called, the three things: the two-party system, the closed primaries, and the electoral college. The combination of those three things utterly destroys democracy as most people think it should be.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with you, Mr. Shields. And moreover, forums like this have to educate our people as to how things are really done. Yes. And the platforms of why things were done. Wes Moore was the first person I met at the gate. I don't know where you met at the gate. Wes Moore was out there in front with his team. Wes Moore has a great presence, very compelling conversation with people. But what is apprehensive to me as I talk to him further, he has a real big admiration of Doni, is where he's going to get his money to sustain a campaign. And whether special interest is going to be predominant in his money. However, what he did, he came out with that match fund where you can't take more than $250, but you get some state money. So he and a couple of the other candidates, I think Joe King, who's becoming a very intriguing candidate. People are listening to King, right? King and Wes Moore, and this is some of the stuff I found out. So Peter Franchot whispered in my ear, he's up significantly and expects to win. But people are very much interested in what Joe King has because he seems to have a very good grasp on the issues and some of the progressive thoughts he's bringing, particularly to urban environments relative to housing and to economic development. People are listening to. So in the next couple of forums, I'm going to start listening to him a bit more. But the money is what it's all about, in terms of being able to get the message and get the name recognition across the state. And so you kind of wonder what someone like Wes is going to do from a financial perspective to get his name out there.
What you see, Mr. Dashiell?
Well, you know, I have agreed to serve as I guess I'm called a senior policy advisor to Wes Moore. And my role is not, I'm not intimately involved on the financial side. I'm more, because I don't choose to be, but I'm a lot more concerned with his ability to identify, acknowledge, and speak to the issues of the Black community. And I've told him over and over again, if he can't get 85 to 90% of the Black vote, he's dead. He's DOA anyway.
Well, help me out, Mr. Dashiell. You went down there with Al Hathaway, but you're on the board for Wes Moore.
That's because Reverend Hathaway's former church, Union Baptist, has been a client of mine from long before the time when he became the pastor, and he's also a personal client, and he's a good friend. You know, we don't all have to travel the same road as long as we understand what the destination is and we agree on where that should be.
You hear that, Haynie? You and I do not have to support the same person to remain friends.
Absolutely not. It's not. It's business. It's not personal.
What about Kelly Schultz? Was Kelly Schultz there?
Yeah, Kelly was there as well. So Kelly, you know, I suspect that Kelly feels as though it's not really necessary for her yet to be at the forefront, particularly as issues. So she was a little low key to me, Donnie, in terms of meeting and greeting. She was a bit low key. A lot of her people were out there. There's Kelly right there, you know. And so little low key, came a little late, didn't stay very long. But I think Kelly is going to let the Democrats kind of, you know, slaughter each other and hope that Robin Ficker, who had a significant amount of signs all the way down there, as well as Cox, two of her opponents in the Republican race, okay, had a significant visual presence down there. But at the end of the day, I think that Kelly will probably be the Republican candidate for the general election. And I think she's waiting to unleash whatever until after the primary. I just suspect that.
How are the Republicans going to? Mike, you got to put yourself in the mic when you're not talking. It's got feedback.
What was your question, Donnie?
How are the Republicans looking?
Oh.
Hey, Boyd Rutherford was down there. You know, he was down there a fair bit of time. You know, Hogan was there, but Hogan seemed to be enjoying himself. He didn't seem to be in the political handshake move because, of course, he's term limited. You know, and as I mentioned, Andy Harris, that's Andy Harris country, Cox country, Trump country. You saw a lot of Trump signs still down there. So you knew you were in the mixture of, you know, people who still believe. And, you know, I got to tell you, thank God they didn't get a 6-month preview of Joe Biden, because if they had gotten a 6-month preview of what's happening with Joe Biden right now, there's no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump would still be our president. No doubt about it.
You agree?
I'm not, you know, unfortunately, Biden is not getting a lot of help from his VP. Okay. And if any, in fact, she may be more of a drag than an assistant. Actually.
Where did she go? Well,
I don't, yeah. And that's when the best thing you can say about your vice president is that she disappeared, then you've got a problem. And right now, that's probably the best thing that can be said about her. So yeah, this is Joe looks haggard. He's frustrated because he's operating in a political environment that doesn't exist anymore. He still thinks it's back in the day when you could talk sensibly to people and reach a compromise that made sense. That day passed a long time ago. That era, Trump, if there was anything left of it, Trump ended that era. You either with me or you're against me. That's the game that's being played today. And if you're not willing to play that game, then the kitchen is really not the place for you, because it's going to get real hot.
Mr. Dashiell, my prediction is that Joe Biden may have an effect on Maryland politics. Doni had mentioned something about Schultz, and I slept on it last night and tossed and turned because I said, wow, man, Doni may have a point. Kelly Schultz may be in a better situation to continue the Republican rule in the state house based on the national platform of politics. Joe Biden, I believe, is going to have an influence and effect on state and local politics based on what he's doing, man. You know, just Afghanistan, in my opinion, we've been there 20 years. He should have waited another year before he did what he needed to do, which I don't disagree. We need to get out of there. But the timing was not good with the immigration reform, with the COVID mandate controversies. He's just created himself a buzzsaw of problems that are going to spill over into state politics, possibly hurt Francho. Francho is more of a conservative Democrat, and he may get a bit more crossover from Republicans than people expect. But I think Joe Biden is not doing local politicians like Wes Moore, the guy from Prince George's County that just picked Rashawn Baker, that just picked the Venezuelan young lady off the city council of Montgomery County as his running mate.
Right.
Those type of progressive and liberal Democrats, I think Joe Biden's going to hurt.
Mr. Dashiell, what do you
I think there's a fourth branch of government that's really calling the shots here, and that's the media. Quite frankly, the media is controlling the narrative across the board. For example, if I say something that's a lie, you would say it's a lie. You wouldn't say I said something without evidence. Okay, you have never, no matter how much they protest the lack of evidence and all the 200 cases that were all dismissed, they never come out and say Trump is telling a lie. They never use the term. They always say it's without evidence. Well, what does that really mean? Say it in plain terms. They're not willing to do that because they control what we think about what Joe did in Afghanistan. It didn't make any difference even if he'd waited a year, we'd have had the same story. If we waited 5 years, we'd have had the same story because that's the story that the media chooses to portray.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with you. And part of the reason why Baltimore can't change its narrative is because the media, and that's why I tell Doni all the time, until we get a platform of media in our community that our people can look at first versus looking at what they look at in comparative, right, and get our message out there, it's going to be real tough for us to gain any traction. Not that our media, if it's Black media, has to be always sided to Black, but it has to be something of substance that gives the truth,
yes,
as the truth, which we don't get now because we don't own that process.
Right.
And that's it's a major problem in our community, is the communications piece.
I got a basic question for you. Do either of you gentlemen think that Bob Clay killed himself?
I don't.
Yeah, my sister worked for him, and just the way that you look at forensics, it is absolutely hellaciously impossible to have had happen what happened just from, and white people invented, the forensic stuff, and it makes no sense. And if it doesn't make any sense, it isn't usually true.
Do we believe this shooter killed himself?
Who was that? I didn't hear you.
Officer Suda.
I don't believe that either. I don't believe it. I don't believe it was. I don't believe that Suda killed himself either. I think Suda was a hit. I think Clay was a hit.
Well, you look at the fact simply. How much was the reward, Mr. Dashiell? How much was the reward?
Yeah, 20? It got up to 25,000.
No, man, it was over $100,000.
Really?
I believe. Yes.
Oh, okay.
And so people turn their mamas in, man, right, for that kind of money or less.
Absolutely.
And they didn't get one hit of a hint of anyone that was going. That told you the story right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So they've been lying to us. So well, that's why we do this show, because we in a one newspaper town, and that's dangerous. One daily newspaper that sets the tone, and if you don't pay them, you can't read their news. They give you 2 free stories. The Baltimore Business Journal won't give you any free stories. And I'm not sure how that works for democracy. But
well, Donnie, the print media has nearly become irrelevant. I mean, it's continued to exist only because of advertisers. For the most part, even people who read it online now, rather than physical, having a paper in their hand. We've got a problem because we don't have media, but we don't look at the avenues of media that are available. I remember many years ago when United Cable came to Baltimore, and they were the first company that was awarded the Baltimore Cable franchise, which eventually now belongs to Comcast. But I remember I was part of a group of Black folk that were slated to own a part of the system, and then we, in fact, for a time, did own part of the system. And I remember saying to the other people in the group, we need to look at programming, because I think that's where the future is. I think that's where the money is going to be. And the reason I said that is because part of the deal that we had with United Cable was we had 5 channels. And so I said, what we got to look at is what we're going to produce and put on those channels. But some of the almost everybody in the group had more money than me, and the money and the vote was we're going to flip our interest, take our cash and run. And that's what happened. Leaving those channels unattended, essentially returning those channels to the control of the operator, the franchisee. We've had opportunities to invest in media, to control the source of the stories, but we've eschewed them because of short-sightedness, in my opinion.
It's amazing, Mr. Shields. I was in Africa, right? In Africa, everywhere I went, the TV, the print media, or as you say, the digitized media, is controlled by our people, so they control the messages. And that's a tribal-based situation, almost like our racial and political situation, but politicians' platforms are decided or finalized based on what the press is printing and what the press says, because they pivot a lot.
Yes.
As soon as the press picks something up, they become defensive or offensive based on what? Because they know the people will see it. And the final call is probably, in our Black community, one of the best produced mediums of media that I have ever seen. But it's ostracized by our people. I'm not Muslim. I just looked at the quality, the reporting, the resource to put out something that could reach a multitude of people, not just nationally, but internationally. But they have been ostracized and put as a militant so much by the white folks that our own people have believed that and refused to look at it as a credible medium for media. They have health stuff, they got sport, they got everything we need that could galvanize us with a platform. And we have probably sank it more than white people have sank it because of our belief and what we have been fooled to believe about the Nation of Islam and anything that comes out of it. Profound.
Now, the miseducation of the Negro is a terrible thing. That's Carter G. Woodson said it a long time ago.
1903.
Yeah.
He said that it wasn't just them. The miseducation came from the miseducation of our Black educators.
Yes.
And so going to Harvard is relevant to us or impressive?
Yeah.
What's important, relevancy or impressions? That we come back and educate our people with impressions.
Is being a Rhodes Scholar impressive?
Not to me. As I told you, I've agreed to serve as a senior policy advisor. But the first meeting that I had with Wes Moore, he came to my office. I said, before you start, let me tell you 3 things. Number 1, I'm not impressed with the fact that you got a scholarship from a white imperialist from South Africa called Cecil Rhodes. Number 2, I'm not impressed with how many tours you did in Afghanistan, because you shouldn't have been there in the first place. And I'm not impressed with the fact that you were the executive director or president of a nonprofit organization where everybody on the board was a white billionaire. Now, what do you have to say? Tell me why you want to be governor. And what he said was ultimately, I need to better understand what's going on. I need people around me who know what's going on, and I confess I need help. That impressed me and the people who were in the group to the point where we became not just supporters, but advocates.
Wow. Mr. Dashiell, I'm going to say something controversial. And I'm going to look at it from a dollar and cents and win and loss perspective. Forget personalities, principle over personality. Black people's best hope for change in this state, I believe, is going to come from a Peter Franchot. Let me quantify that, right? First of all, he's at a stage in life, he needs something, and he needs us more than we need him, right? And there's a hostage, because sometimes you take people hostage, you hold people hostage. If we as a people can agree on what that looks like and what it means, because sometimes we get more from our enemies, if that's the way we perceive them, when they feel as though that they have something to gain from us as well than we do from our friends. And this is an opportunity to hold Peter to the fire if we can agree on what a Black agenda looks like and force him to finally make some change that is instrumental in our communities that we haven't seen in decades. And then we got the president or Adrian Jones down there. I just continue to say to them, give us another seat on the Board of Public Works in the state of Maryland. That, along with holding Peter Franchot's hostage to a Black agenda, we may start to see some things move.
Mr. Dashiell, what's to stop Joe Biden, Peter Franchot from doing the Joe Biden? Black people saved Joe Biden in South Carolina and Georgia. And thank you very much, people, and you have a good day.
Doni, I believe in the frozen snake principle. I believe that no matter how cuddly and how much support you may give, when the snake falls out, it's going to bite you, because that's the nature of a snake. That's what they do. Okay. I don't think there's anything that we can do to change who Peter Franchot is. I think that what he does ultimately will depend upon the kind of people that he surrounds himself with. And what my experience is, that what I've seen anyway, is that they may not be the same by name, but they're going to be the same by nature as the people that are in the campaign. The people who would occupy who would be in administration are going to be just like the people who had influential positions in the campaign itself. That's what I've seen. I've also seen, in terms of a white politician who was successful, and they acknowledge and know that it was because of the Black vote, is Johnny Olszewski. Now, I'm in Baltimore. I live in Baltimore County. What have I seen from Johnny O since his election? I've seen a Black woman, the head of the Department of Public Works.
I thought you were going to say you saw a Black lady get hit.
No. I've seen a Black woman who's the head of Public Works. I've seen a Black woman who's the county administrator. I've seen a Black man who's the county attorney. I've seen a Black man who's the head of the county economic development department. I've seen a Black man who's the head of the county health department and social services. Those are the things that I see. And I, for whatever reason, I'm chairman of the county revitalization committee. So you're right. When that's what I mean.
Does he have Blacks in his office?
Yes. Yes.
In his immediate office?
Yes, he does. Now, we got some issues because the culture of Baltimore County goes a lot deeper than who's the head of the department, and we all know that. So it's not. I'm not saying he's not coming on a white horse and things are changing. But the fact of the matter is, we've got in Baltimore City, we've had since Dew Burns. Dew Burns was the first Black mayor. Then I think it was followed by Smoke, and then the Sheila, Stephanie, or whatever order they came in, Jack, and now Black politicians typically treat the Black electorate far worse than white folks. because they come unapologetically asking for money, and then they forget you if they win. That's what I've seen. So
are you serious? Black politicians turn their back on black people? Oh my goodness.
I know you're surprised to hear that. I know. But so can we, going back to the question, can we ensure that Peter Franchot, can we hold him hostage as Jim Clyburn does with Joe Biden? I don't know. I don't know the man. I don't have a personal. I know him. I don't have a personal relationship with him. I trust. If Michael Haynie says we can do it, I'll trust Michael Haynie. Because we know where each other lives, and we can confront one another, and if we're wrong, and we can deal with that. And that's the thing that we've got to see. The winner in this race is not who gets elected; it's the people who come together in the process of advocating for that person. Victory for us will be our people coming together. I don't really care who sits in the seat; doesn't make any difference to me. Because sooner or later, there's going to be an opportunity to remove that person, whether it's 4 years, 8 years, or whatever it is. I'm concerned with our collectivity. I'm concerned with how we come together as a people to go in one direction or the other. That's my issue. And if we do that, we win.
Mr. Shields, I couldn't agree with you more, man, because at some point we have to take ownership of our own issues. However, in this race, we have a black man or two really, that may not be electable, right? They may not. They may not. I don't think so. Peter Franchot is different than Peter Franchot. He's a very conservative Democrat. He's different than Joe Biden to me. Although he may have the same age persona, be at the same place in life, he appeals as much to liberal Republicans, if there's ever such a label such as that, as much as progressive Democrats hate him. I.E. Davis and some of the other politicians in our state, they don't necessarily get along with this guy. And so he almost has to come with an agenda of a base. And I think it could be us as a people. And then he's at a stage of life, I believe, and I know him. Okay. And I know that, as we all do, there's skeletons. I'm sorry?
Have you sat at his dinner table?
Didn't have a chance to get by there that day, but I've sat at a table with him on multiple occasions and really checked him out.
I think that's because there was a movie by Regina King called One Night in Miami. And they had a guy playing Jim Brown, and he was talking to his coach, and they were reminiscing. And then the coach was in the house, and the coach told Jim Brown, he's like, we don't let pigs in the house.
That's not the issue here. But the issue here is us getting in this election. I'm sorry?
Would he let you date his daughter?
I think that he probably would. I think he's there. I do. I do. But for me, it's a matter of what can we get? Where can we get the most squeeze out of the juice? Who is it that has the most to lose by not conceding that what we want this time is real? And we have leadership in the right positions with Adrian Corey McCrae, who was there and says hi, by the way, to BlackUSA.News. Okay, as well as so we're in a good position statewide to hold Peter to a point where we get some firm commitments. But if we could get our leadership in the legislation to come up with a amendment to change the Board of Public Works from 3 to 4, that's a strong foothold for us.
Okay, I don't think that's between now and the election, but I do want to get to the bottom line question. Tonight, there's a forum on the Black agenda. Mr. Shields, what is the Black agenda? What should be on the Black agenda? Because we don't need somebody else to tell us what it is. We know what it is.
Donnie, I'll put it this way. America has to pay its bill to black folk. There's a bill. There's a debt. It has to be paid. And all this other stuff about, social programs, there's a bill that has to be paid. 3 weeks ago, I was on a program with Armstrong Williams, who you all know. And he starts off. He didn't know me. He didn't know anything about me. He in fact, Hathaway asked me to be on the show. So Armstrong starts off with, he says, Attorney Dashiell, it's my perspective that the Black community is sitting back asking for people to give them things. They just want to give them things. And don't you think that that's wrong? I said, Armstrong, in 1862, there was an act called the Homestead Act. And under that act, that government gave 160 acres each to white settlers moving across the country. They gave away 270 million acres of land that cannot be replicated to white settlers moving across the country. I didn't get the 40 acres. And I'm sure the mule is dead. And I don't recall anybody complaining about giveaways. There is a debt, Donnie, that this country owes. Not white folk owe, this country owes, because unfortunately we've conflated with the idea of holding a certain position with ownership of the product itself. They're not the same. Presidents are not kings. Presidents do not own the country. And just because historically a number of people other than us have held a position clearly doesn't mean they're going to hold a position forever, which means that the real issue here is who decides who decides. That's the only question.
Come on, Mr. Haynie, what is your take? What's the Black agenda?
The Black agenda for me is education, first of all. I think that we have to. So you got Rushion Baker from Prince George's County, the second worst school district of Baltimore City in the state. You got them coming up with this Kerwin Commission. We have to figure out, to what Carter G. Woodson said, the miseducation of the Black people, right? Yeah. Which is still happening in the 21st century. If nothing else, and it's not about money.
No.
It's about us, as Mr. Dashiell said, and I believe, taking ownership of our own issues and fixing them.
Yeah.
So before we can ask a white conservative Democrat or a liberal Republican to help us with the Black agenda, we got to figure out what that means on our own. And we haven't done that yet.
I agree.
Well, I'll say that public education, anybody running for governor needs to articulate a Black education task force for Baltimore and Prince George's, and Baltimore, 23 and 24 at the bottom consistently. I need a task force on public education. Number 2, Black business. So when I did talk to Brooke Learman on this show, Brooke Learman had no comeback, no response whatsoever to her role as one of 3 people on the numbers as to whether or not she would support Black business. To Francho's credit, I have heard him support Black business on the Board of Public Works. Clearly, Boyd has, and even Martin O'Malley has. But Brooke Learman refused to answer that question to my satisfaction. So that's public education, Black business. Number 3, ex-offenders. America has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's inmates, and most inmates in Maryland come from where I live, 21217, or 21215, or on the east side, 21205, another zip codes. Number 4 and number 5, affordable housing, universal access to healthcare. But that education and that business, because we know businesses, Black businesses hire Black people, and we know that without education, we're dumb, we're illiterate. And I'm very tired. Here's the conservative side of me when Black people say not everybody is made for college. When I see a son of a gun, Mr. Robert Dashiell, come up Pennsylvania Avenue one-handed on a wheelie in the middle of traffic, that same young man could be up in BCCC, getting his GED or some type of education. Because even if you are a carpenter, a plumber, you still got to be able to count and balance a checkbook.
Donnie, with respect to education, let me just say again, D is not successful. D should not be a passing grade in any system, and it is in Maryland. It certainly is in Baltimore City. What message are you giving? That's number one. Secondly, we are a touchy-feely people. I mean, I went to all black schools. I never knew what it was to sit in the classroom with a white student until I was in law school. And that's when I discovered that what I imagined all along was true. They were no smarter than me. Okay. But we've allowed the whole issue of public and higher education to be corrupted by those who are in it just for the money. We talk about our kids. Everybody, you're right. College is not for everybody, but we don't have a system that recognizes the gifts other than that. In fact, we look down upon kids. If you can't go to college, that means you must be stupid. That means you must be dumb. That means you must not be cut out. You're not going to be successful. When the most successful people never stepped foot in the college in the first place. College, and part of the reason is we've advanced. We've tried to support education for the wrong reasons. Education and income production are related, but they're not congruent. The reason that you want education is to make your life and the lives of the people that you love better. If you make money along the way, God bless you. That's great. But education and employment are not tied together. There's never been a nexus for black folk anyway. That's why a black college graduate still today makes less than a white high school dropout.
And Mr. Shields, if I can say something compelling, last comment.
Yes.
This pandemic has put education in the black community backwards 8 years.
Yeah.
Because of the lack of access, because of the way it was done. I talked to a couple college presidents yesterday that said enrollment, CCBC was forced, and that's just an extended high school. They were forced to go back on campus last September because they lost 4,000 students, mostly black, because they didn't have the technology or the access to do online learning. We all heard of what happened in Baltimore City relative to that. A 1.2 grade average last year. We have, and how do you catch that up? Do you put all those students back a grade? The system doesn't work that way financially to allow that to happen. So therefore, you have a matriculation of education that's not going to happen. That's going to go to the workforce, we haven't really seen the results of this pandemic educationally until the next 4 years. We'll see the spill up. It's serious, man.
And regrettable but true. Regrettable but true.
Good deal, gentlemen. We'll be back. Maybe we'll see you this evening at 6 p.m. down at the BWI Weston Hotel for the 2022 gubernatorial forum. This is the first that I've heard of, an opportunity to see the candidates. And tonight we will have Doug Blackshirt to Ashley Coleman with Black Business Roundtable. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate you both and have a powerful day. Good morning, world.
Same to you. Bye-bye.